I think the majority of the reason why people don't get into this stuff is just because it is another big workload that gets added onto your plate. But there's far more benefits in just in having that level of insight that allows you to take training sessions with a different approach. Because, a lot of times I work with a soccer club, and every team, their biggest priority is like, we're not in shape, we're not fit. But then they come see me and they want me to change their, like, the kids get me for 30 to 45 minutes a week, opposed to their respective, training core for the 4 or 5 hours a week, right? It's the 45 minutes that they're with me isn't necessarily just going to change their conditioning. You need to change the way that you approach training and the drills that you do and the intensity that you drive behind everything that you do, right? Like, most coaches get to the field and they just come up with their practice plan, like, in their head,
100%.
right then and there. Have an approach, and like, even if you're not wearing GPS, have an approach and understand why you do things, how you do them, when you do them, and what the outcome of those exercises are.
100%. I think that's why periodization is such an important element. Research sometimes says that it's bollocks, but I will always stick to periodization in a form that makes sense to their highest competition games. I think having them fresher for those games is always a benefit in my perspective. So like I really like undulating type periodization programs because you can sort of tailor it to whatever's coming up. Like you can run some more your high end speed stuff during like easier games because like you can probably get away with it.
Yeah,
But one aspect that I really wanted to get into is breaking speeds and forces and how that can mitigate injuries. I don't like injury prevention because you can't prevent any injuries.
for
You
sure.
can
Yeah.
mitigate the impact that they have. That's our job.
Yeah. No, yeah. And I mean, I've been fortunate enough to say that, like, in the 5+ years that I've been prioritizing speed development, I have yet to have anyone pull their hamstring, during a training session or anything like that. And I think it's just simply like a baseline starting point for any coach is just like, whether it's a stop, whether it's a hand watch, whether it's whatever it is, like, start tracking a certain level of speed to find a way to drive intent and get your athletes to run fast more often, because I think
Mhm.
that as a performance coach and especially a S&C coach, like, a lot of times we prioritize weight room stuff. But depending on the sport, I think soccer is a very hard sport because the way it is out here in the States is a very money driven, like, you want like, as a club, you want your athletes to play soccer year round, and there's no strength and conditioning program built within the club. So the athletes spend 4 or 5 days out of the week out on the field. They play 2 to 3 games on the weekends. And they haven't ran top speed once, but their
Mhm.
loads and their volumes are crazy high. Like, their adductors and their groins are always hurting because all they do is kick the ball all the time. And the last thing a coach wants to do is have them play less soccer and get into the weight room. Like, coaches hate to hear when they ask me, like, hey, my kid's dealing with, a growing injury. And, like, okay, well, did he practice today? Yeah. Well, why? Well, he said he would just use his left foot. Oh, well, okay. Why don't you get him into the weight room? Oh, well, there's no time. He doesn't like to go to the gym. I mean, there's only so much that you can do, but
Mhm.
um, yeah, I think that when it comes to just like under, I think every sport is different. I think the culture around every sport has definitely been built up to be something that it's not. Like, even with baseball, we train speed when baseball isn't typically a sport that you would look to train speed at. Just had a conversation with a coach who prioritizes baseball, semi-pro, and professional athletes, and just doing interviews with some of those guys, and, like, they never train speed, and then they go out, they hit a ground ball and they run to first base and they pull their hamstring because they haven't ran fast in 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks. Who knows how long. Um, I think speed needs to be prioritized. Speed needs to get tracked. Um, and you need to have more of an approach on the technical side. And I think every S&C coach, movement is this the pillar of
Mhm.
all things. Like if I can teach an athlete how to decelerate well, and I can teach him how to accelerate well, and I can teach him how to get into certain angles and shapes, like he's going to be that much more efficient on the field.
100%. With sort of accelerations and decelerations, sometimes like you can achieve like 3, 4, up to 6 times their body weight and that braking force. How do you sort of approach that with your individual athletes and team athletes?
Yeah. Same thing. I think just like like the ability to have the instant feedback on how intense of an acceleration or how intense of a deceleration it was, we can look to manipulate certain different training aspects as far as like drill sets that we're doing. Um, we know that if we come in, I mean, and as far as teams, when you're talking about soccer in season, they're getting the majority of their workload in the practice setting. So it's really hard to try to implement any more decelerations. So then we look
Mhm.
back to like how can we manipulate the intensity of these certain drills, and how can we look to get athletes into certain positions without taking them out of their training environment. And that's like the biggest thing. Like the last thing I want to do is do a speed session before you play soccer, right? Or do a very like even though like for me resisted running is key, and it's the easiest way to build force and power in an athlete in their acceleration by just
What
hammering
kind of
some
resistance do you use?
I mean, well, loads. I mean, as far as like sleds, bands, got an Exergenie. Um, I would love a 1080 if I could
Mm.
find 22,000 somewhere, but um,
Loose
we do,
change.
we do overspeed with freaking when a kid gets there, of course, like we do overspeed with like two bands, and one kid will skyrocket out a hard acceleration, the other kid will build up out in there, and he's getting into some overspeed accels without even knowing. There's different ways of
Mhm.
doing that stuff. But when it comes to my like my and this is something I learned from Jonas Dodu, it's always short to long. So like when it comes to the private sector and the athletes that I get in the private sector, our focus is definitely always more just like understand the verbiage that I'm saying, understand the drills that we're doing and why we're doing them. Don't I'm not just kind of wanting to put you through a workout. I want you to leave the session that much more knowledgeable. And when a coach asks you what is it like, what is acceleration? You know what it is. It's about projecting your body through space and going from A to B in the shortest time possible. It's very simple at the end of the day. But when it comes to like your first step, right? If I can get you to understand how to project your body well in your zero step, how to get a nice good push, you're going to be able to apply that laterally, linear, right?
Mhm.
Or in and out of cuts. So for me, it's always understanding the baseline of like linear acceleration, transition, top speed, deceleration, right? And then change of direction and angles. Um, and we spend a lot of time there. So, and that's the good thing that's why I love like one-on-one trainings and smaller group sessions in that setting, because I get an opportunity to really just dive deeper into that specific individual and how he moves, right? I think rhythm is a big thing that gets missed, and like kids don't have a
100%.
concept and basis of like rhythm and understanding their body and how they move together. Um, when it comes to team sports, it is a little bit more of like, in the off season, there's certain time periods where we can't be on the ball stuff. So we will get after it and we'll teach the concepts, but I can't get too strung up on like whether everyone grasps it or not, because we have a limited amount of time at practice. We have, a certain amount of time that we can use the ball, and we still look to achieve certain things. But I think private sector, I spend a lot more time on the technical,
Mhm.
where on the team based side, I spend a little bit of time on the technical. I still want to, it's a lot easier to get some athletes into like the classroom and we can show some visuals and stuff. I always like to, like a lot of the kids are visual learners. So if we're doing an acceleration day, I'll try to send them home with some homework to look at like, what does a good acceleration look like?